Hello, Chair of the Audit Committee. My name is Joan Lee, and I will be sharing with you the results of the whistleblower investigation for BioPharma. In this first image, the pie chart shows the ratio of transactions made with unapproved vendors to approved vendors during the 2019 fiscal year. Out of roughly 84,000 transactions, only 0.04% of the transactions were made with unapproved vendors, so there may not be a material effect on the financial statements due to these purchases. However, the 0.04% of transactions should still be investigated since it may be a cause for concern for fraudulent activity if cardholders are making unapproved purchases with unauthorized vendors. A control that I recommend implementing is that all new vendors entered in the master data must be approved by the purchasing manager or department supervisor. If an employee tries to make a purchase with an unapproved vendor, the AIS will display an error message to the user notifying them that the purchase order cannot be made. Once the vendor is approved up in the master data, then the user can purchase from them. This next image shows a bar chart of the top 20 employees with the greatest P-card activity during the fiscal year based on the number of transactions made by the employees. It also lists the total dollar amount of all transactions made by each employee. In general, the dollar amount of purchases correlates with the transaction volume, so the dollar amounts decrease with the number of transactions. However, for some employees, they have a surprisingly large dollar value that doesn't match the number of transactions they completed. The transactions that show discrepancies, such as those made by users like Meadow Monroe and Paul Harvey, should be investigated as they could materially affect the financial statements. A potential risk this data displays is that some users may be making transactions that exceed their limit according to their STL level or even the $10,000 monthly limit. A control to minimize this risk in the future would be to have a limit check in the AIS for purchases. The spending limits should be programmed in the AIS and cardholder master data, so if users try to exceed their spending limit, they may receive an error message and their supervisors should be notified of this intent. This last chart compares the ratio of transactions that were signed off and or not signed off by the P-card holders and the department supervisors in the 2019 fiscal year. It also shows the total number of transactions for each category for comparison. With nearly 98% of transactions being signed off by both the cardholder and department supervisors, most transactions appear to be valid. However, the 2% of transactions missing verification from at least one of the two parties should be investigated to ensure that the transactions are verified and legitimate. The transactions not properly signed off may indicate the risk of fraudulent activity or material misstatements, as cardholders may be making unauthorized purchases from unauthorized vendors, or they may be exceeding their spending limit. The 42 transactions that were not signed off by both the cardholder and supervisor should be scrutinized most carefully because there's the risk of purchases being made by unauthorized users. A potential control against these risks is that the transactions cannot be recorded to the batch sent to the accounting department unless it is signed off by both the cardholder who made the purchase and their department supervisor. I also recommend that a report be created and reviewed periodically that reports all transactions not signed off by at least one of the parties to detect the risk of any fraudulent purchases. And that is my report. Thank you very much.